I'm now going to invite the panelists to come and take a seat up here on the hot seat and ask a question and then throw it up to audience questions as well. So if you've got any burning questions, keep them in your mind. But I thought I might kick things off maybe with a question for some of people in the audience who might be working in organizations at the moment and are coming up against some challenges about bringing purpose into the workplace and having those conversations with others that might not quite be so on board. So Weston, I might throw to you first about how you bring people that you work alongside with, to bring this sort of conversation of purpose and make it really, really meaningful at KPMG as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think it's a great question because we all come from different angles, different backgrounds. And KPMG is doing a lot of this right now, actually. So we've got a chief purpose officer, Richard Buller, and he's been with the firm for a number of years. And what his main goal is about aligning purpose. And so, in order to align purpose, we got to understand what each other's purposes are. And so I signed up to what's called the Purpose Forge, where it's where we have active programs within KPMG that distill down what each individual purpose is. Because the idea is, if we can align our purpose, then everybody will be much happier, productive, and it'll be a healthier working environment. And so I think for me, that's key. How do we align our purposes? And so it's about talking the language and understanding where other people are coming from. So I know in some conversations I was talking with WWF and or others, and he was telling me, when I talk about conservation, it can be challenging when I'm talking to some of my friends who may not be on board with kind of the green type stuff. But if I talk about protecting rivers and forests where people camp and fish, that translates much stronger.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you very much for sharing. Hilary, I might throw to you and ask what advice you might give to somebody who wants to bring more of this purpose into their career. Obviously, you've gone from the Greens, you've got 4 Wild Places, Ben and Jerry's. It seems to be a really common thread through a lot of the work that you've done. And what advice would you give to somebody else that might be wanting to embark on a journey like yours?
It's a tricky one because I think that we don't necessarily need to have purpose in our, like, if you enjoy your work, but it's not necessarily, saving the world, solving the world's problems, that's okay. But I guess a lot of the work I do, including with For Wild Places, is volunteering. And I've always volunteered. And I wouldn't have got the job at the Greens if I hadn't been a candidate. And that was essentially a giant volunteering role. And it's interesting hearing the thread through the others speaking. It's kind of you do something not knowing where it's going to lead. And then before you know it, like I'm the activism manager at Ben and Jerry's. And it's a role that I never even knew existed, but I was kind of really perfectly suited to it because of the range of things that I'd done before. So I think that you can have it outside of your work, but it's honestly a real privilege to have it within your work because then you love your work. And weeks like these are just like Christmas. And you meet all these people who are similarly minded and similarly focused. And so it's kind of two-sided, but I think that we need more people who are within their communities being, whether it be helping deliver meals or picking up rubbish or replanting the streams or the green spaces within our communities. That's extremely purposeful work as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be with your work, but trying to get your workplace, like with our social mission days, to get out and use the power of your team or your skills to give back to those organizations is incredibly powerful as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Matt, I might throw a similar question to you. Again, you're somebody who has had purpose threaded through all of the incredible work that you've done, and your take to, or any advice that you could give to anybody in our audience who might be embarking on something similar.
One of the experiences that I had was I I was a part of a study in cross-sector collaboration back in Seattle. It was a civic tech incubator, and one of the things that we're looking for is what's the leading indicator of a good collaborator. And what they found was that one of the best markers of a good collaborator, if you could screen for any quality, it's curiosity. Um, and that's because when you're working in a team or you're working in a new space, um, or if you have conflict, getting curious, people that naturally get curious, that want to know the other person's perspective, that want to understand where people are coming from, it opens up a lot of doors. And so, if I could offer one piece of advice, if you're embarking into a new, journey or a space, you want to get involved, um, I would just recommend show up and be curious.
Thank you for sharing that. Camille, you've had a really interesting journey yourself, both being a founder and now working in a purpose role within a very purposeful organization. Could you share a little bit about the difference of those two ways of working and what your experience has been like in sort of navigating the different spaces there?
I mean, they are very, very different spaces. I started my startup Xylo Systems because of that burning fire that I had to save our species and make it easier for companies that were harming our ecosystems to stop doing that by changing their own business models. And that in the very beginning was a lot of solo work. Like I was doing that as a side hustle back. I started it back in 2020. Hillary and I did an incubator, and that was the first time I put Silo Systems down on paper and started thinking about it as a business. I was a scientist. I had no idea how to run a business. So I decided I needed to do an MBA on the side as well. So during COVID, I was working full time. I decided to start a startup, which I'd work for like an hour in the morning and then an hour in the evening. And anytime I could get in on the weekend. And I was also doing an MBA. So I was wearing like so many hats. And I did that throughout my entire startup career. I wasn't just the CEO and the face of the company, I was also HR and sales and marketing. And it made it easy to embed our mission and our purpose into every single pillar of the business that we were running, because it was either just me or me and my co-founder or myself and a small team. So we talked about our purpose and what it meant for every aspect of the business every single day. The difference now is at Bank Australia, I'm at a much, much bigger company. And so the amount of engagement that needs to be done every single day has increased tenfold. But this organization has been around for a really long time, and they've obviously been doing impact for a really long time. So I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in that there's been people who have come before me that have done that deep work of embedding, but it just means that the amount of engagement I need to do, not just within the company, but also outside the company and in our advocacy work, that engagement requires 10 times effort. And much to Weston's point before, doing that means speaking other people's languages. So if I'm speaking to the finance team, I need to speak to why does nature and biodiversity matter for the bank when it comes to our finances. When I'm speaking to the risk team, why does nature and biodiversity matter for our risk management? And for an example, nature and biodiversity is so embedded in our marketing and our brand that if we were to walk away from our impact commitment to nature and biodiversity tomorrow, that would have incredible impact on our customer acquisition and retention, which obviously leads itself not only to risk management, but also to finance. So speaking people's language now requires a little bit more effort, and things move a lot slower in a big organization. I could make decisions left, right, and center at Silo Systems because I was the CEO and I was moving like 100 miles an hour every single day. Whereas now I'm working a bit slower and a bit more intentional and can think much more long-term instead of, I need to get this sale done, I need to get this investment done so we can reach our next milestone and unlock that impact milestone that we have.
Yeah, and it sounds like you are very well vested at wearing many, many hats at once. And I imagine engaging with all the different teams, those many hats that you've been wearing for a long time come in handy to speak to all the different people that you must have to. Would love to throw it to the audience now to see if anyone has any questions for our wonderful panelists.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone for sharing. My question is about the side of industry that isn't on board. And I'm going to do something strange and kind of give you an option on how to respond. I'd love for each of you to either hear your advice for people, this isn't me, but asking for a friend or a family member who's within an organization that's just not aligned. Um, so I'd love to get your advice on how they can operate from within, or to hear an example of how you've seen your companies influence firms that aren't aligned, how as a peer you're approaching that. I thought the option would make it easier, but I think I misjudged.
I mean, influence is a great one, I suppose, and I think in my role, we got to look at how we influence, and so we influence through our consulting and our services, and I think that's an important one. Making sure that sustainability and understanding for the environment's embedded in that. Also, I think one of the great ones is particularly in an organization like KPMG is your supply chain, because we spend a lot of money on things like IT and other services. And so by putting your values clear in terms of how we want to operate, who we want to engage with, then it requires others to have a little bit more of a deeper thought in terms of, yeah, well, if we want to be engaged with KPMG, we've got to do a bit better. We've got to have net zero targets. We've got to have circularity within our products and services. So I think that's one way to shift the dial. Yeah.
I think I've got two answers. The first is, if you're working in a company that doesn't align for your values, I would get out. And I don't think everybody has that option in some cases. Sometimes life creates constraints. And so I think in that case, I would lean back on my comment about curiosity earlier, understanding, well, this isn't something that matters to you, and I'm just curious about what your position is and why, and just asking lots of questions. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that I've learned working in the impact space is that sometimes systems change creates strange bedfellows. You look at an organization like OzHarvest. One of OzHarvest's major partners is BP. They fuel all the vans on the road. And I think on face value, that seems to be a conflict of values. I'm not, deeply involved in that partnership. I know that it was certainly a very thoughtful one from the OzHarvest perspective, and thinking about the impact that OzHarvest can have. But also, one of the things that we look at as OzHarvest Ventures is, if you want to be a part of systems change, it's a lot hard. It's really difficult to change that system from the outside. And so part of why we go up the supply chain and build those partnerships with those organizations that aren't yet on board is to cultivate that influence over the time, to build the relationships with the people, because sometimes the organization might not be on board, but there are individuals within that organization that are. And so finding those champions, bringing them on the journey, educating, creating connection between that organization and ours. I think that you can move mountains over the course of time.
One immediate example for me is, so Ben & Jerry's is part of the Magnum Ice Cream Company. We're a very new company. We only started, like I said, demerger from Unilever, and existed since December last year, which is exciting in many ways because we're new. We've kind of got the hangover of Unilever, but going forward, who are we and what do we care about? And there's been a lot of change. So I, understand that we're not going to rush into anything. But as someone who is values led, and our team at Ben & Jerry's internally, how do we kind of point TMEC, as we call it, in a way that aligns more with our values in terms of, and I guess we want to, like I said, we're doing we're calling it a reconciliation plan, not a formal wrap, but we're doing our version in the hopes that it will be really positive. And then we can say to the Magnum Ice Cream Company, hey, we've done this. here's all the reservations that you had. Here's how we kind of overcame them. Maybe you should give it a go. So it's kind of leading by doing, and not necessarily doing it, like I said, perfectly, but doing it in a small but meaningful way, and kind of, I guess, assuring the deniers or the people who are more risk adverse that the sky won't fall in, and you don't necessarily have to go from 0 to 100, but there's small steps that you can take along the way to get to somewhere that you'll turn around in 5 years and think, wow, we've had this immense change, but nothing drastic's kind of taken place. It's just been very slowly.
Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. So my question, I think it's gonna go through Camille. I do love the way of like your work, actually, in terms of biodiversity and also conservation. It's just the question a bit because you have been mentioned about the funding, like impact fund, which is you provide to your clients, and also like a piece of land that you guys bought for the conservations. My question, where the source of money came from? Is it the money from your clients or is it the blended finance that your business using? Also to link that, another questions. I do believe when you also provide your service to your client, as it is an impact fund or impact loan. So I guess you might be also have an agenda required back from your clients as well. So to de-risk or to mitigate all those risks, that amount of money, and also to get impact that your business looking for, how you control and how you manage that sort of initiative. Thank you.
All very, very good questions. So essentially how we're managing that impact right now, whether it's from, so the impact fund, which is essentially the philanthropic arm of Bank Australia, where we commit up to 4% of our after-tax profits. Obviously, that money comes from being a bank and earning money from interest on accounts. We put that obviously into areas that our customers tell us that they want to be put into, and that's the benefit of being a customer-owned bank and being a member of a customer-owned bank is you all get a vote in kind of where those profits go. And if you're paying interest, I know now being a Bank Australia customer, I want to know where that interest the bank is earning is going towards. And so that impact fund is mostly distributed through our community customer grants. We provide grants of up to $25,000 for Bank Australia customers that might be running community programs across our 4 priority areas, and they opened yesterday. So if you're a Bank Australia customer, I think the criteria is you have to have been a Bank Australia customer or a Kudos Bank customer now that we've merged with Kudos Bank since June 30 last year. So there is a little bit of criteria. So if you're looking to get into the community customer grants next year, probably join as soon as you can. And the other way we do through our impact fund is through bigger partnerships. So, for example, Parley with the Oceans, that's a bigger partnership through our impact fund as well as more of a corporate partnership. Our impact lending is a little bit different. Like I spoke about, that's more of our loans. And we do this across our impact fund, but it's very, very specific on our impact lending arm is when customers come to us and they want an impact lending loan to purchase a piece of land like the Bidjidanga Aboriginal community in Western Australia did. That deal then goes through a pretty rigorous impact screen. And so the impact management team has worked really closely. So the impact management is myself, our climate action strategy manager, our First Nations strategy manager, and our head of impact management. We work really closely with the impact lending team to come up with a criteria of what meets the hurdle of our impact assessment and whether we move forward with that loan. For example, on the nature and biodiversity front, we have very clear impact assessment on is that project contributing to increased protection of a piece of land? For example, are they going to put a conservation covenant on that land so it's protected forever? Or is it increasing the area of nature and biodiversity that is regenerated in that particular area in terms of hectares? So that's how we're looking at how impact is really assessed in all of our funding activities at the bank. And of course, we're doing that with our profits from interest rates.
Thank you very much, Camille, and to our 4 panelists for today. Good news for everybody is that there are some cold beers and lemonades, thanks to 4 Pints and Oz Harvest, waiting for us at the back of the room. And if you have any more burning questions, I think some of our panelists might be sticking around, so you can jump up and ask them in person. Thank you all for being here today, and another round of applause for our amazing panelists.